Great. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today to hear our zED talk on blockchain. Our presenter today is Kevin Breitnother, who's an IBM Z client technical specialist based in New York City. He's been with IBM for about 3 years now as a Z hardware specialist. However, he's been heavily involved in the team bringing blockchain to Z. Also with us here today is Austin Grice, who's a North America blockchain technical leader. He'll be monitoring the chat and Q&A for us, so feel free to reach out to him via those avenues. Kevin's presentation today will be about 30 or 40 minutes. If you have questions, please utilize the Q&A area throughout the session. Also be aware that these sessions will be recorded, and I'll send out a link of the recording once it's available. There will also be a poll with a few questions as soon as you close out your WebEx, so please take a minute to answer those questions to help us improve in the future. And with that, I'll pass it on to you, Kevin.
Hi, Brian. Can you hear me okay?
Your screen is not sharing right now.
Okay. One second. All right, so you can see my screen okay?
Yep.
Okay. Well, hi. Thanks, everybody, for joining today. So like Brian said, I'm here to talk about blockchain platform and blockchain on IBM Z. I've been at IBM for, like Brian said, 3 years, and I've been focused on blockchain from a technical standpoint. So today I'm going to talk through three real objectives to walk through. I meant this presentation to be pretty high level to walk through, hey, what is blockchain? What are the key concepts? How does IBM play a role in this space? I'll take you through a couple of use cases that we've worked through and really have started to establish blockchain as a technology, a working technology to help improve businesses. And then the last piece is, how do blockchain and IBM Z fit together? Where do they work together, and how are we as an IBM Z team working to bring blockchain to the platform? So start with this slide. Just to blockchain's been one of the most typed, if not maybe the most typed technology in the past 10 years, and we've started to notice a transition as a blockchain team in the last maybe 6 months to a year or so. It's been pretty exciting to not have to lead every single blockchain presentation or conversation I have with customers by having to talk about cryptocurrencies. And what we've noticed in the last couple of years is really customers and businesses starting to unlock the value of blockchain, really from two sides, two perspectives. One is being to improve existing business processes, which I'll talk about. And then the second is starting to unlock new business opportunities. And it's been pretty exciting to see, and some of these numbers can show that it's been pretty exciting to see customers transition from experiment to POC and now into live production networks that are really making a difference. So I like to start with this, and I'm excited to be able to start with something like this from a business perspective versus having to talk about and explain what Bitcoin is and how it's different than what we deal with on a day-to-day basis. So what is blockchain? I kind of talked about at a high level where it's going, but what does it actually do? And I think one of the ways I'd like to start explaining it with, or by, I guess, is it is a novel technology. It is a breakthrough, revolutionary technology, whatever term you want to use there. But really it works to supplement existing business processes today. So we have existing business networks today. We have assets that are transacted across those networks based on transactions and underpinned by contracts. But what blockchain looks to do is handle those transactions and track those assets in a different way that allows us to improve on existing business concepts that exist today. The last bullet point on there is the most important piece. Is blockchain is a ledger, and it's a different way of handling that ledger among a business network. And so it's an immutable, shared, and replicated ledger. So as I kind of go through this conversation, I'll talk about how businesses operate today and how the introduction of blockchain into businesses can start to really, I'll probably say this another 5 or 6 times, but really start to improve business processes and then begin to unlock new business opportunity. So here is how I think the status quo really of how business transactions or how business processes work today. And this is nothing new. This has been around since I'm sure someone decided one day that they wanted to record a transaction or an asset. So this is a practice that's really as old as time, and it's worked for the most part for a very long period of time. And there's been enhancements from an accounting perspective and how do we start to manage this from a technology side of things. But What this reflects is each company or each entity within a business network keeps track of their own ledger. They keep track of their own information, they track their own transactions, and they record it and keep it inside their own databases. And this is inefficient, expensive, and vulnerable from a couple perspectives. In the sense that inefficient in the sense that the time delay it takes for each one of these books to be completely up to date. That's why we reconcile books. That's why I've never balanced a checkbook, but that's kind of the same concept there. Expensive in the sense that every transaction is recorded, in this case, 6 different times across 6 different ledgers. And then vulnerable, which to me is the biggest problem on here, is if any of these books were to be hacked or manipulated, it really starts to affect every single one and affects really the entire business network. What blockchain looks to do is to not necessarily replace this system, because like I said, it's been around forever and will continue to be around for some time. But there are certain places where the inefficiencies, it becomes extra expensive and extra vulnerable. And that's the use cases that blockchain looks to tackle at first, really, by, like this chart says, by creating one shared ledger. And when I mean one shared ledger, I like to make the emphasis that this doesn't mean that every one of these companies is opening their books to everyone else in their business network. What this means is by utilizing blockchain technology, they can open parts of their books or open up parts of their business processes that are particularly inexpensive or particularly expensive or particularly inefficient, that really needs a sense of trust that blockchain can provide by providing one replicated permission ledger across the business. So how does that work? It's really based on these four factors, characteristics. I'm not really sure what the correct word is for it, but these are the ideas and the founding principles, I guess, of what blockchain does, or a replicated permission blockchain does. The idea of consensus, meaning for a transaction to be added into the ledger or added to the blockchain, it has to be agreed upon by the business parties that are supposed to agree upon it. So think a transaction as it goes through. How do we sign those transactions today? What do we need to do in order to update it on our individual ledgers? The same exists with blockchain, except we're using one single source of truth to really add via consensus to that ledger. So then next is the idea of provenance. So now that we have every piece of information about a particular transaction or a particular asset in one place, we can track the provenance of it significantly easier. Rather than bouncing around between each one of the entities to understand what's been in their ledger, we have one area that we can go to track all the provenance. One of the technical capabilities of blockchain is the immutability aspect to it. So once there's consensus that a transaction has occurred properly and should be added to the ledger, it is immutable and cannot be changed. And then probably the most important one on here is finality. So and the idea there is saying that this is the final product, this is the final single source of truth, and this is the last place that we will go to refer to when there's any business disputes. So the idea here, again, not is to open your entire books and share every single piece of your ledger, because that's just not how a business works. But what we can do is start to find those places that there's particularly more friction, or we find that there's costs both from a financial side and time side to keep the books reconciled, or really to create that trust. And that's where blockchain can work to supplement the existing business processes today, is coinciding, working hand to hand with some of the existing business processes today. So I started with the business side of it. So what's in it for the business? Why does this type of a technology make sense? So I'm going to take a step back or a step forward, however you want to think it, and look and kind of dive into what the technology is. So really, there's 2 different categories of blockchain technology that are out there. You have public versus private, and permissionless versus permissioned. And I'll start with public versus private. It's almost self-explanatory, but it's the idea of who can join the network. Private meaning you have to have an invitation to come to the party. Public meaning anyone can join and anyone can leave at any time. So public meaning typically you'll hear Bitcoin. That's probably the most famous one. I promised I wasn't going to talk about Bitcoin, but it always comes up at some point. And then the other category is around permissionless versus permissioned. And that means really, what can you do on the network? Do you have an identity on that network? And what transactions are you authorized to do on that network? And so what we're talking about specifically today, I'll touch on some of the other aspects to it, but really what I'm going to focus on today is that idea in that bottom right corner, which is a private and permissioned blockchain, which is blockchain for business. And there's a couple of different distributed ledger technologies in there. Broadly speaking, that's what everything on this chart would say. But in that bottom right corner, there are a couple of different distributed ledger technologies that are private and permissioned that I'm going to focus today, and where IBM has had focus on is Hyperledger Fabric. So I'll talk where Hyperledger Fabric came from in a second. Now, in hindsight, and maybe I should have flipped these two charts, but Hyperledger Fabric, if you take one thing from this presentation, is that it is open source. I know that may not be the most important thing for some people, but I always see IBM's Hyperledger Fabric. But really, one of the benefits of Hyperledger Fabric is that it is open source. And there's many communities and many different contributing organizations that help drive the product or drive the solution. And that's one of the best parts about it. IBM is one of many contributing organizations that's contribute a very significant amount to Hyperledger and Hyperledger Fabric. But if you take one thing, it is open source and continue to be developed by the open source community. Hyperledger Fabric is one of the distributed ledger technologies, like I mentioned in the last slide, that falls underneath the umbrella of the Hyperledger family. And then that's underneath the Linux Foundation. So Hyperledger as the organization is looking to tackle many different blockchain problems and has a bunch of different projects underneath that umbrella, Hyperledger Fabric being one of them. Hyperledger Fabric is really focused on blockchain for business or blockchain for enterprises. Specifically, I think the two places where it really shines are around the aspects of privacy and confidentiality, and then really getting a ledger that will be able to be used for businesses focused on that confidentiality and that privacy. So being able to conduct transactions on a blockchain, getting the benefit of that, all while still keeping some of the privacy and confidentiality aspects that the businesses that we work with need. So where did it come from? So back in late 2014, early 2015, I'm mentioning Bitcoin again. The technology underpinning Bitcoin, the blockchain aspect to it, so the idea of one ledger going across, or one distributed ledger, really started to open eyes both at IBM and the customers that we work with. And IBM began to investigate this and seeing what pieces of technology we can, what aspects of this can we take and start to build, really build an open blockchain protocol with. And as that open blockchain protocol began to develop, it was donated to the Linux Foundation, and the Hyperledger organization was born. As you can kind of see, we've had a long provenance in blockchain. That's a joke that I promised myself I wasn't going to say, but provenance meaning blockchain being able to track all the way back, IBM having a long provenance in blockchain. I'll assume that everyone's laughing, but you're just on mute. But IBM's been around with blockchain for a very long period of time, and we look to continue that and have really built on top of Hyperledger Fabric many different solutions and products. So here's a brief glimpse at IBM's blockchain strategy. So it starts kind of at the bottom at that Fabric level that I've talked about, and we build on top of Hyperledger Fabric for the most part. And we released IBM Blockchain Platform on top of Hyperledger Fabric. So what does that mean is Hyperledger, what IBM Blockchain Platform provides, a little bit of a tongue twister there, but it allows you to build, operate, grow, and manage Hyperledger Fabric blockchain network. So Hyperledger, rather than dealing specifically with the command line, we provide the tooling and the capabilities on top of Fabric to make it easier to really build, like from a smart contract perspective, and then to operate and manage what a network looks like. I've found when working with customers that sometimes it's easier to learn Hyperledger nuts and bolts from blockchain platform, because it gives you a visualization aspect as to what does your network look like and what are you able to do on it. So that's been a very successful product and been very helpful to wrap around the Hyperledger Fabric distributed ledger technology. So on top of that, we really work solutions and ecosystem, to me, kind of go hand in hand, but IBM has started to, I think the term is eat their own cooking, and build solutions on top of IBM Blockchain platform. So utilize our reach with customers and our position with some of our customers to solve some industry challenges and implement blockchain as kind of an ecosystem partner for a group of companies. I'll talk a little bit about one of our solutions, which is IBM Food Trust. And we have a couple other ones, such as Trust for Supplier and TradeLens, which solve different problems for different industries, but all built on top of IBM Blockchain platform. And then alongside that is our services team, and they work really from every stage of a blockchain project and have done a great job at first helping customers to realize, hey, what is the benefits of blockchain? Not necessarily through a presentation like this, but where are there specific problems, or what are the low-hanging fruit problems that we're able to solve? So we do something called business value design to help to understand which of our partners, which people in our business network do we need to share information with, or where are there frictions that we can remove by combining, by really adopting blockchain technology. So we work all the way from helping customers to envision what that network can look like, begin to grow that network, and then have even the expertise on the side of Hyperledger and IBM Blockchain platform, technical skills to help you build networks from a technical perspective as well. So really covering the whole gamut of things from the technology all the way to the business side to help customers realize the potential of blockchain technology. So I'll pause for a second, see if there's any questions in the chat. I can't see it, I don't have it up on my screen. Okay, I'll take that as a no. So the next piece here is I'm going to talk about is the use cases. So these are use cases that IBM has worked with, and I kind of put this in I took three different use cases. First being how an existing business process that we kind of created a network around and found a way to improve. The second is kind of starting with the business process improvement, but how has blockchain unlocked the potential for further collaboration or further business opportunity? And then the last one is more in the permissionless or the tokenization aspect. So not necessarily a use case, but still something I wanted to make everybody aware of that's out there. And I thought that this was the best place to bring it up. You say you're presenting on blockchain and digital assets, typically you have to include something about digital assets. So IBM Food Trust was one of the first use cases that was implemented and has been a partnership with IBM and a bunch of companies, including Walmart, Dole, and some others that have really helped to solve the problem or begin to solve the problem of food safety. So if you were to walk into the grocery store, you can grab a head of lettuce from wherever they're located in the grocery store, and it'll probably have a label on it that says made in California, or grown, I guess is the better term for it. Hopefully that's not made. Grown in California. And so when you see that tag, you're getting an assurance from the grocery store that it actually is from California. But what the industry has seen and why food safety is such an issue today is that the ability to understand exactly where that head of lettuce came from California, from the farm in California all the way to the grocery store where I live in Maryland, there's many issues with the siloed data that exists across that time frame. So in order to understand where that head of lettuce is at a particular point in time, you may have to make a bunch of phone calls that look something like that similar diagram that we saw in the first chart, which is at the bottom left. And that's because of the siloed data, and a lot of this is still paper-based transactions. So the handing off of paper from one part of the supply chain to the next. So in an effort to begin to solve, and there's still plenty of work to do from a food safety perspective, but to begin to solve the problem of food safety, IBM worked with a couple of different partners to create what we call IBM Food Trust. And it utilizes blockchain technology to take those same entities that are at the bottom diagram and take the supply chain and really implement blockchain technology underneath it to be able to share the information so that we can understand, for instance, where that head of lettuce was at each point in time throughout the entire supply chain. And this helps from a couple of different perspectives. It gives you real-time visibility into the products that are recorded onto this ledger or that are recorded onto this ledger. And then it also helps with dispute resolution. So if you have one single source of truth where the information is located, it helps to resolve disputes between suppliers and grocery stores and different areas along the supply chain. So really what this, like I said at the beginning, is this is an existing business process today. And we took a technology like blockchain, and again, it's a team sport working with multiple different partners across the supply chain, and found a way to improve upon that existing business process today by utilizing that technology. So similarly, actually, believe it or not, is WeTrade. I'm a firm believer in WeTrade. I think it's one of the best use cases I've seen for blockchain. And what I really like about it is it takes that existing business process that we talked about today, but what WeTrade has done is really take it to the next step. So we have the network. How do we kind of take the next step and provide ways to get further business opportunity? So what is the problem? Small to medium enterprises have a difficult time getting trade financing solutions as well as liquidity. They often have to go to multiple different banks in order to get an interest rate that makes sense to them. And they struggle with liquidity because they're smaller companies. So if I'm a small business and I just shipped my items off to Hong Kong, for instance, or to San Francisco, I have to wait sometimes up to 90 days to get paid for that. So what WeTrade, the organization and the company did was they said, why don't we bring together some of the largest banks and be able to provide a better way to get trade financing and liquidity solutions to these small to medium enterprises. So they created essentially a network of buyers and suppliers who were trusted and validated by being a part of the network. So now the sellers can connect to the buyers directly and use the banks to facilitate these transactions. So what that does is a couple of different things. Now that the banks are kind of sitting in, now the banks are able to provide trade financing and to all of these different small to medium enterprises through that connection. And then because the banks are part of the network, now the payments can be automated or facilitated through the banks, which really lowers the intermediary time that it takes to get a payment processed and back into the hands of that small to medium enterprise. So that's the business process that existed today. And they've done a great job at expanding that from a business perspective and giving these small to medium enterprises, giving them the financing solutions and the liquidity solutions that they need. But now it's taking it to the next step and saying, now these banks have all of these additional services that they're able to provide, and now they have a network to be able to do so. So that specific small company who's selling widgets, now they have access to, and banks can provide easier ways to give these companies access to some of their other services that maybe these enterprises or these small companies wouldn't have looked at before. So this shows that there is ways to create new efficiencies within an existing business process, but then this network is really starting to take the next step to say, now that we have this network, what additional business can we do in that network, and how can that be helpful for all the parties that are involved? So the last use case, if you will, I guess, that I have to talk about today is around tokenization. And tokenization comes up, and it's often can be seen as a little bit confusing in the sense that I'm talking about two different aspects of blockchain here. So for the most part here, I've been talking about really business-based blockchain. So we're talking Hyperledger Fabric, we're talking private permission blockchains that are built on existing business networks today. Now, this is albeit slightly different. There's still the underlying benefits of blockchain to something like tokenization that I want to highlight, and that's the reason for including this here. What we've seen in the financial services industry especially is that people have interest in investing in these tokens, so these cryptocurrencies that's up there. And what these companies have to be able to do is find a way to be able to provide these assets and allow customers to trade these. But from taking another step back, really from a use case perspective, what does a token mean, or what does what does blockchain even have to do with this? And really what it is taking existing assets today and digitizing them. So what that means is essentially, there's a couple of different ways to do that. But what is the value of digitizing, like for instance, a security, or digitizing like a stock? And really the value there is that the ownership rights are then attached to that particular digital asset or attached to that product, and it's tracked along the blockchain. So for instance, of a security, you can see the provenance of where that security has been, what it was bought for, what it was sold for. And it helps to provide additional liquidity to some of the underlying assets that are being traded, because they can be traded a little bit faster from a digital perspective versus how it's done today. Then on the other side of things, if I'm moving over to the left side of the chart, natural asset tokens is very different. It's not necessarily a tangible asset, but it's more, how do we provide credits, or how to, like for instance, carbon credits or gold, how do we digitize that to be able to be traded and traded on a blockchain network? So think of ways as to how can you reward somebody for lowering their carbon emissions or something along the lines of that. Moving up one more, the stablecoins so stablecoins and cryptocurrencies kind of go hand in hand. Cryptocurrencies you think of as like Bitcoin, Ethereum, really cash, like I think it says on there, cash for the internet. Blockchain-based currencies that are meant to represent or be used similarly to cash. The problem with cryptocurrencies, especially if you're someone who's been trading Bitcoin in the last month or so, is they're very volatile. Bitcoin's gone all the way from, I think, $8,500 to almost $10,000 in the span of a month. So not the best way to transact. If I buy a cup of coffee with Bitcoin and it was $4 today, and then I find out Bitcoin's at $15,000, so maybe I spent $7 on a cup of coffee, which I didn't need to. So the volatility of cryptocurrencies is what really introduced the idea of stablecoins. And what stablecoins work to do is they're cryptocurrencies or digital currencies that are backed by a price stable asset, meaning like the US dollar or the euro, or even gold, I think, has been used sometimes for it. And the idea there is to say, hey, we want to be able to get the aspects of cryptocurrency, like the easy to use, anyone can spend it, digital currency. We want to get the benefits of that, but we don't want the volatility to it. And so the idea is that you would have, I think, how, depending on the regulation of the day, it's probably changed 14 times since I last looked at it, but the idea of a stable coin is you're supposed to have an equal amount of whatever that asset is, US dollars, as you have, for instance, Tether out in the marketplace today. So the reason for showing this and taking a kind of summarizing this chart a little bit is that there are other use cases, and in Z and in blockchain, we're seeing, not just from an IBM side of things, we're not just seeing the idea of the business network, but we've seen customers who are asking, saying, hey, I am an investment bank, or I'm an exchange. I want to be able to exchange these types of assets because I have customers that are interested in it. IBM, how can you help us to be able to set up that type of an exchange? And the main difference between a token or a blockchain-based asset is it's linked specifically to the private key, and that private key is what represents your digital ownership of that asset. I'll talk a little bit about what that means and kind of how we can help customers along the way in that space. So now, lastly is blockchain and IBM Z. Where do these come together? How do they fit? And how can you begin to utilize your IBM Z estate to helping your blockchain journey? So what I want to show first here is a sample of what a network can look like. So here is that kind of the circle, if you will, in that one of those first charts I showed. So here's the blockchain network. And here are two of the organizations that decided to join the network. So they have a compelling reason to share information between one another to eliminate some sort of friction, or there's a business benefit to it. So Beta and Delta decided to join an organization, and they both happen to have all of they are big IBM Cloud customers, and they would like to build their blockchain applications on IBM Cloud. So now their blockchain network's going very well. They are doing transactions back and forth. Maybe they're getting close to being live, and they realize that wait, we're missing one part of our supply chain. We need somebody else to come in and join this network in order to really get the full value of it. So they invite Alpha Corp to join, and Alpha Corp is not an IBM Cloud customer. They're a big mainframe shop, and they would like to leave their data and their blockchain applications on zED. So we as IBM Blockchain Platform say, great, we would like to help you do that, and that's part of both the IBM strategy and the IBM Blockchain Platform strategy to say, we will help you to deploy applications wherever it is, on whatever cloud or whatever infrastructure you would like to. So Alpha Corp's able to join and deploy IBM Blockchain Platform on top of zED. Now we have one last piece of the puzzle, and that's Gamma Corp, who is a tech startup from early 2010s, and they have everything on AWS. So this network says, okay, great, well, we're gonna have you join, and given the cooperative nature of blockchain, it makes sense to have the multi-cloud capabilities that IBM Blockchain Platform and then IBM is able to provide as well. So now we have a network with three different infrastructures, 3 different providers underneath the covers. And let's say that there's a 5th organization that's potentially coming in, and they are a mix of on-prem with IBM Z, IBM Cloud, and AWS. Now they go to the organization and they ask, hey, where are we going to put this? You guys have kind of done a little bit of all of it, and that's part of the benefit of multi-cloud. That's the benefit of blockchain. Where do we put our stuff? And that's where we've worked with customers in the last couple of maybe year or so as to how do we help you decide where to deploy your applications? And this goes not just from a blockchain perspective, but to really any application that we're looking at today with IBM's multi-cloud capabilities. So we have what's called fit for purpose. And so the chart that I have here on the left is really the most common criteria that we look at for any application. And then the factors on the right are more blockchain specific. So these are the criteria, these are the factors that you would need to consider in order to determine where to place your blockchain application. So the two, I could focus on cost, but what I really, that's almost self-explanatory. But what I really want to focus on here is 2 pieces, is the integration with existing applications and then the security. Performance, we've seen great numbers on Z, but it is all a matter of what type of transactions per second do you need for the network? What is the latency? What are your requirements? And having a fit for purpose study done and examined can help you to determine where it makes sense to deploy your application. I'll talk specifically about the integration components and then security, but I wanted to include this fit for purpose just to, as a way of kind of showing, hey, how can IBM help you to determine where to place not just your blockchain applications, but really any applications that you're looking at. So lastly here, we're going to talk about why does IBM Blockchain Platform, or why any blockchain really, why would it make sense to deploy this on Z? And like I said, it's really to me, the requirements on that last slide are really dependent on the use case, your transactions per second, the scalability, how many nodes do you need to host on your actual network or your infrastructure. But the 2 that I want to highlight are really going to be there for every single use case. So I'll start with the middle right here, and that's the co-location efficiency. So Z is traditionally known and has been for many years that system of record for CICS, DB2, IMS, for your critical applications that run your business. And what we talk about with customers is how do you integrate those existing applications, those existing systems of record with the data that is enriched by blockchain. So you've spent all of this time to build out a blockchain network to get reliable, valuable data. And how do you get that back into your existing applications to do something, to actually take action to it? So think along the sides of food trucks, for instance. So lettuce, we now know exactly where the lettuce is coming from, but how do we feed that back? How do we feed that information back into our supply chain data? Or how do we feed that back and give that information so that we can take actionable insights to it? And it can be for any application, any blockchain application. One of the products or advancements we've had with MQ recently is to add a blockchain connector to it. So this allows you to speak from Hyperledger Fabric back to MQ and connect connect blockchain data back into your systems of record, meaning KICS, IMS, DB2, et cetera. So really your information coming from the blockchain is only as valuable as the assets or what you're able to take action to. So the next piece is security, and this I've seen people do entire presentations on, so I'll try to do it in a couple of minutes, but really the idea of security is around two different aspects. So it's the actual, I'll start with the hardware security module. So IBM Z provides the highest level of hardware security module that exists on the marketplace today. And I mean, that's a little bit of a mouthful, but what does that actually mean for your blockchain applications? Because of the nature, like the cryptographic nature that blockchain is, each one of the identities on the network is accessed and given access to transactions based on a private key. And however secure your private key is how secure your blockchain is. So what we provide with the hardware security module is that the highest level of protection for your private key and really for your entire blockchain network. This holds true for our digital asset solutions as well, where we've been able to provide protection to these digital assets. The example that I like to give on this one is to show the importance of a private key is just Google Bitcoin lost private key, and you'll have hundreds of stories of people that have lost hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars by simply losing their private key. And the reason of speaking to that is it shows the importance of a private key and what it plays in specifically in blockchain technology. Then from the other side, so we talked about the security, the hardware security module aspects, but I mentioned that blockchain is cryptographically intense. So in that first bullet point, the reason why I started there is the on-chip acceleration, the cryptographic hardware that the CPAC-F that IBM Z provides really helps to accelerate the cryptographic function. So when it goes back to transactions per second, we're able to accelerate that. Accelerate the cryptographic functions to be able to run more transactions per second. And not only that, but with the pervasive encryption release that came out with the Z14, now it's possible to not only have faster transactions per second, but now we could even encrypt the data on the blockchain as well. So taking something secure and making it even more secure. And the last point, then I can open it up for questions is, so we talked about the security, the co-location, the integration components, but all of this is underlined with the traditional Z platform. So you get the traditional qualities of service, the reliability, availability, and serviceability that Z has had for years. So you get the value of the security add and then the integration to your existing systems, but all while you still get the benefits of Z. And given that this is, I would assume mostly a Z audience, I didn't want to, typically that's very well known with our Z customers, but the reliability, the couple of nines of reliability, then that zero downtime that you get with the platform. And the last bullet point I had on there is the multi-cloud flexibility. You can deploy certain components on Z to take advantage of the security, to take advantage of the co-location, and then you can deploy other components elsewhere. That's the value and the beauty of the multi-cloud story that we're working with the IBM Blockchain platform. So finding a way to leverage your existing estates, but then also taking advantage of cloud capabilities, both in IBM Cloud and then your other cloud providers as well. So here's a quick summary slide of what we went over through the concepts, use cases, and then why specifically Z, where it makes sense to deploy on Z. Here is our traditional engagement model with blockchain. So you can all check the first one off the box, the let's talk. But then we start to work down towards how do you get hands-on experience. I have a couple of links that I'll share with the group here to get some hands-on experience with badges and understanding both Hyperledger Fabric and then other blockchain technologies as well. And then we start to work through the first project. So starting small, looking, like I said, at where's a particularly frictioned process. I don't know if friction is a word, but where's a process that you could really utilize blockchain technology to eliminate friction, and then start to build it out from there. So I think I should have changed the face-to-face because I don't see that. I don't think that's going to be in the near future, unfortunately. But we do offer these as remote options as well, both for the first project and scale-out option. So And then the last thing I have for you is a couple of different resources. I have podcasts and then the new badge that came out recently to get some hands-on experience. And that is all that I have. Thank you everybody for your time this morning. And I hope you got something out of the 30 minutes or so that we had. And let me know if you have any questions.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. Good job. We got a couple questions here since Austin had to drop off that maybe you could get to. The first one is Data Privacy Passport a recommended solution in the network with Z? So Data Privacy Passport being the relatively new solution that was released. I don't know if you're able to answer that one.
I have heard that is being looked into. I don't know how that would necessarily work with blockchain.
Right. So my understanding is data privacy passports essentially wrap your data with an additional layer of metadata to protect that data when it's in flight or at rest or whatever it may be. So I imagine that will integrate well with the blockchain platform, but I'm not sure that people have gotten to that point yet of figuring out exactly where it fits. The second question is, do you have real examples of customers joining a blockchain network with IBM Z?
There are a few, so I'm not sure which ones are public and which ones aren't. So if you want to send me an email to that, I can walk you through some of the ones. I have a couple in my head. I just don't know which ones are public or which ones aren't, so I'd have to make sure before I
Okay.
say that.
So Marcelo, if you want more information on that, feel free to reach out to either Kevin or myself.
I included a paper done by Deloitte, and that's public, and that's in the podcast and papers resource section right here. So they have a Linux one that they're using for blockchain specifically. So that's one that we could definitely talk about. I'm happy to give you more information too on that if you'd like.
Okay. Another question: does IBM offer IBM Blockchain on IBM Cloud? I think that would be a yes.
Yes. So we have both. I focus more here on the the software offering, which is deployed on any Kubernetes service, but there is a SaaS offering through IBM Cloud as well. And so what we've seen is customers get started using SaaS and then can move their blockchain from SaaS into software. Is not uncommon deployment model, but sometimes people jump right into software due to some of the considerations like the fit for purpose that we talked about. Data residency is a pretty common one, so it's a reason to start right on SaaS or software versus SaaS, but they're the exact same user interface, exact same product, just depending on where you deploy it.
Okay. And then the last question I see here in the chat is, what support do we offer around smart contracts?
So there is a VS Code extension. I'm not sure exactly what you mean by support, but for IBM Blockchain Platform, it uses a VS Code extension that helps you to write, edit, debug, whatever you want. Really helps you to write and debug smart contracts to be able to deploy into your Hyperledger Fabric network. So that helps the process and makes it easy to package them and deploy them to your peers or to your network. And then from an actual support perspective, our services team or the GBS team has a lot of experience in and has Hyperledger Fabric specific developers who have written smart contracts and deployed them for customers. Does that answer your question?
Anthony, if that does not answer your question, feel free to reach out to Kevin or I afterwards. With that, we're at the end of the time that I had allotted. So thanks again, Kevin, for your help. Thanks for Austin for joining while he was able to. If you guys have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to either Kevin or myself. Remember that there will be a couple questions, a poll after you close out your WebEx. It'd be really, really helpful for both of us if you guys can complete those questions. And with that, thank you again for joining and have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.